Hey folks, it's Jeremy Kirkland. You're listening to Blammo. We are doing it this week. What a day. What a day it is. And I'm going to be honest, I don't even know what day it is that you're listening to this, but I hope it's good. So, talking watches this week with Quaid Walker of Bezel. And we just went in hard. Don't expect us to be rattling off a bunch of reference numbers, although you'll hear a couple here and there, or sit and debate why this movement is better than this, because it is not that kind of pod. It's not that kind of episode. But we get into all the things behind the things on watches. We start dissecting like why people buy them, memories, family. Gets a little heavy at times. But I got to say, for me, these types of chats, it's one of the things I love the most about getting to do this show and getting to do this pod. But like, because it's never just about the clothes, or it's never just about the watch or the thing, or it's always the journey. And look, if it sounds tacky to you, fine. But like, this is the stuff that people actually care about. And so it was great. Like I'm so excited to keep watching Bezel grow. It's a ton of fun. But we got into it. We discuss watch churn, how Bezel has evolved over the years. We talk imposter syndrome, getting nuts on auctions, engravings, and those classic "can I pull this off" moments. It's all in there. Let's go.
Well, we got to talk about this because
let's talk about it.
I feel like, well, I mean, obviously there's a ton of stuff to talk about with Bezel, but I feel like there are watches that I buy and I know I'm not going to own it for a long time. And I'm okay with it when I purchase it. And then there are watches that I buy and there's no question I will never sell it, no matter what. It's just never going to happen. And like my Daytona is definitely one of those things.
Epic. There you go. I feel like that's rare for me. So I'm glad that.
Well, you churn.
Yeah, I churn.
But you go. I mean, but you're trying all the things you like, right?
Yeah, I think it's also just like it's a stage in life thing. It's like who am I to have this many watches thing? And I think the liquidity aspect of it, and that's why we built the whole platform. It's like being able to get in and out of these things and sell to other individual collectors so you get full market value out of them, has allowed me to be kind of the case study for that, where I buy way too many things I shouldn't probably buy. And then I always have a collection of like 4. There's a few watches. There's one watch in my collection that I will never sell. And it's because it's the watch that like really made me want to start a company in watches. But even that watch, which my co-founders would kill me saying this, like even that watch, I have moments where I'm like, like it'd be great to have another watch. And so it depends.
Well, I mean, okay, I think we can talk about a good amount of this stuff because I think I want to talk about Bezel. I want to talk about what's happening there, but I think there is a level of imposter syndrome that I think happens with anyone that gets into watches.
Totally.
And like for me, I've talked about this a ton over the years in terms of like clothes or figuring out my style or figuring out things that I like, into which I don't think I've ever been able to do it from a distance. So whether it was a brand or this, it was like I had to get into the entire brand. I had to own it. I had to figure out how it fit on me. I had to figure out how it felt in different like scenarios in my life. And
totally.
Watches were definitely some of that. I mean, there are watches which I won't like bash, but like I'm not going to be the guy who is walking around with like a reference 96 and like being the vintage Paddock dude. Like it's just never going to happen with me. I'm okay with it. I realize that I'm much more interested in like buying like neo vintage, I'm air quoting, or like modern stuff. Things that like if I fell into a pool or if my wrist went underneath the faucet while I'm giving my kid a bath, that I'm not gonna, freak out. But I don't think I was able to figure that stuff out until I bought and owned it. I mean, there's a bunch of Cartier I used to own at some point that I've taken advantage of. People getting really into Cartier. I mean, a lot of stuff like that I've kind of slowly moved away. But even then, because you kind of hinted at this, there are things like when I wear this Daytona, I'm not going to lie to you, I feel like I'm cool, but I also feel like the biggest loser ever because I'm like, should I be wearing this? I mean, But I'm curious about how much of these, because I think you and I are similar in like the acquisition stage, and then figuring out like whether or not it fits, and then figuring out like if you're going to hold on to it or let it go, and So I don't know. I'm kind of ranting here, but
No, I think you're spot on, and I think the relation to fashion and clothes generally is certainly there, at least for me. I think like when I think about watches, I have the idea of myself wearing the watch, and then I
okay,
also have the reality of myself wearing that watch.
yeah,
And I think there's the other side of the spectrum, the matrix is like the just aesthetic beauty of the watch that I can genuinely appreciate. And then also like that watch on my skin and arm and lifestyle. And I've bought watches on many different sides of that matrix, and I've
yeah,
kept them longer or less long because of that. Like I think the function aspect that you're talking about, I wear a 16610 to do. I call it my watch I wear when I'm not wearing a watch, like a neo vintage sub,
yeah.
and
Great watch.
I wear that because it's a tank, but it also like feels vintage at the same time. But I can go swim in it and surf in it and run in it and work out in it and sleep in it and whatever I want in it.
That's the
And
lug hole sub, right?
yeah, it's lovely. Everything about it's
Yeah.
perfect. And but it's still modern and you can trust it. And it's, but I'd rather have a 5513 or a 1680. Like, I think that looks cooler. I like the plot, like the loom better. Everything about it, I like better. But you sacrifice like, I'm going to go run a bunch of miles in this and flop around in the ocean like an idiot. And I don't have to worry about the watch. Right. So I think there's the function aspect. And then there's a little bit of the imposter syndrome, who am I aspect with the, I don't know. I bought I love Daytonas too. I've owned the black version of the one that you're wearing.
Yeah.
Um, I bought a rose gold Daytona with sundust dial and baguette hour markers at retail. I thought I was the man. I thought it was so cool. And it's one of those things where like you see a photo of someone wearing that watch with like a linen shirt on like Cape Cod, and you're like,
Yeah.
yes, like
Yeah.
that is the way to do that. It's so nice. And then you put it on with like a normal outfit you wear to the office, and you're like, what am I doing right now? Like I can't, I'm so paranoid about everything about this. And I started wearing sleeves more when I went places because I like didn't want people to see it and I wanted to be able to hide it. And like, I don't know. I think like in photos on other people's wrists, whatever, you're like, this is a beautiful watch and the craftsmanship is incredible and like it's so well finished. But then you buy it and you're like, nah, I can't even. I'm embarrassed that people see me in this because it's just not me. And so I think there's a
But you
bunch.
had to buy it to know that you didn't need it in a way.
Yeah, I think there's a. It was one of those watches where I was in the boutique looking at it, kind of the start of my watch collecting career, and
Yeah.
I think I looked at it in the mirror way more than I looked at other watches in the mirror because it felt crazy.
Yeah.
Whereas like other watches I bought, it was like, yes, where do I sign? Like, where do I find this one? I think a little bit, I called some people first, like, can
Yeah.
I do this? And obviously I think all the watch people in your life, yes, menu, because they're really excited to see the watch and play with it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, and I've had like different watches along the line where it's like, I don't know. I think there's some watches that just like hammer it home for you and it hits you on a level that transcends aesthetics. And then there's some watches. I think you were talking about Cartier. Like I have a certain affinity for a Cartier tank in a precious metal, probably yellow gold on a leather strap. I think there's something cool about having a smaller watch that does that, and you throw together a certain fit, and that ties it in. And then there's
Hmm.
some moments where I'm wearing it in the wrong setting, and I'm like, "What am I doing right now? Like, why do I have this watch? It doesn't fit me." Right? We were at we were at Barrett Jackson last week, and it's for those. I mean, if you're not familiar in the car space, it's like a big car auction, and we were the
Huge. Yeah.
official timekeeper. And
Congrats.
thank you. The vibes at Barrett Jackson are not Cartier tank vibes. Like the vibes at Barrett Jackson are like America wear a big watch vibes, right? And I thought, and so like the vibe that I was in as well, like you shift the watches and you try to like chameleon to the space that you're jumping in.
What'd
And
you bring down there for yourself?
I had like subs and GMTs
Yeah.
and like Rolexes on, right? Because I think
Yeah.
that like resonated better with the space that I was in. If I was doing so I was like putting on, I'm wearing a cardigan right now. Like I think the Cartier tank like matches that
You're wearing a
vibe.
Comme des Garçons
I'm wearing
cardigan.
a cardigan, exactly. Yes, I think
Yeah.
that matches the vibe of the get up I have right now, early morning office,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that stuff's important, especially like, I mean, I have a lot of friends who are getting into watches, and then I have other friends who like, I feel like we were all kind of the freshman class at one point of like people that were like very excited about watches. We're doing a lot of studying about watches, but in a lot of ways, and I say this to people who will message me, who are like, "Oh, does this fit me, or can I pull this off?" And I've been like, "Well, you have to buy it. You have to own it to then figure out if it does." And in a lot of ways, like, it's funny because you had mentioned that Daytona earlier. I now, even though I'm wearing this one Daytona, a part of me is like, I think I want to move most of my watches and double down on some like diamond baguette or like diamond dial, like just wild watch. Because right now it already is serving a purpose
yeah,
of this is like my very, very nice watch that I'll do for like certain things. It is not what I'll wear on a day to day basis. And so I'm like, if that's the point, then I should just get the nice watch and basically just have like a crazy wild diamond dial. Like if I'm going to really treat it like jewelry, I'm going to get that, but I feel like you can't figure that stuff out until you own it, which is why the only thing I always tell everyone when we get into watches, is I'm like, this is a 10-year game
yeah,
because this is not like I bought this and let me check it off the list and now I'm going to go continue my like life achievements. Like you have to like figure out with some of these things, figure out what you like. I mean, this is separate from the fact that we can discuss later the rise of independence.
yep.
The rise of like the Chapex and the what Carl Vutalen. I don't even know if I say his name correctly, Vutalenin but
I'm
like
certainly not the custodian of how to say things correctly either.
so it's like there's all those things in there, but I tell everyone like you have to buy these things. And this is not, I'm not just trying to promote like rampant consumerism and over like debt, but like you have to put yourself in this journey and figure out what you like so you can then, the same way with clothes. Obviously it's a little bit more expensive, but more and more people that I know that are in this game are at a stage in life where this is how they're kind of measuring some of their achievements. It's not two Porsches or a house in Telluride. It's through these watches or through this. And I'm curious. So, what was the watch first off that you got that you're like, I'm never going to sell it ever?
I'm wearing, it's a Hulk, so it's
Oh, right.
the green Submariner. And so prior to the Hulk, I had purchased other Submariners, like
Okay.
older Submariners, and I loved them. I think it was the first watch I ever bought. First bonus at Google, I bought Google's my previous job. I bought
Yeah.
a Submariner, uh, just because they felt like the logical thing to do with the first like big boy check you've ever received in your life.
Yeah.
And I think that allowed me to enter the club a little bit, and it was I think it was the coolest thing I've ever owned, and I flexed it like you're talking about jewelry. Like I wore it, I never
Yeah.
took it off. Like
Yeah.
I remember learning like very quickly that I'm not supposed to shower with these things. Like it just didn't, it felt odd not to have it on my wrist. Like I like looking at it so much. And but they were readily available. It pretty much every, relative dealer in the area had a 90s sub at some degree, whether it's a 1406 or a 1660. And I finally got like bitten by the bug and spent more time in it. And then I was like, all right, I'm ready to buy like a more hyped up piece,
Yeah.
and more hyped up. And it was still in production at the time, being the Hulk. I think it was production value at the time was like $8,000, maybe a little bit less than that. And
Yeah.
I think the market value was 12 or something. And I remember being like,
Yeah. It's about right.
this is ridiculous. Like, this is insane. I've never spent this much money on anything in my life, and I'm paying a premium. I feel silly, like whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so the Hulk was my first foray into like really the secondary market. And I wanted it at retail, so I went to Rolex, and I was laughed at, and I was put on some wait list that like was the back of some piece of paper that didn't really exist.
Yeah.
And you try different ADs, and different ADs are giving you different questions, so you feel like you have you're like deeper with one of them because they asked you what your favorite restaurant is. And I still don't know why they do that. I guess it's to like build a profile for you to see if you're affluent enough or engaging with the culture enough to feel, I don't know. It's like,
I'll interject very quickly and explain what that is. It's trying to find out if you are in your community. Are you like, so like asking someone their favorite restaurant, if they say it's a place that's 3 hours away, they may not be part of that local community. So those are usually ways to find out whether or not that person is there, because they basically can't ask, are you here to buy this and flip it? But they want to find out, like, you know, like they want a customer for 10 years. By the way, I'm not defending Rolex in any way, but like those are these little questions that they'll try to ask to find out, like, are you here because you're looking for something to buy and flip because you read some, site online, or are you looking to own this for yourself? And that's like, you can't really say that. It's kind of like taboo of a question to ask. So you say like, what else do you do? What do you, where do you like to eat? And it's like, oh, you eat at the place down the street. Okay. You would know that because you live here,
That's good to know. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No, that makes sense, because I feel like a lot of people just, every time I'm in a different town, I roll up to a boutique and I try to see what's available. So that makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
Next time I do that, I'll research the local cuisine and come in hitting there. That makes a lot of sense. So that was, I wanted a Hulk. I went the 80 route. I was thrown out the door metaphorically, almost physically.
Yeah.
And I ended up in the secondary market. And I think like I had bought a few watches prior to this, but I had really like collected sneakers and streetwear, and I had used GOAT and StockX as the products to build most of that collection.
Yeah.
And I think my expectation entering a new secondary market, spending more money than I'd ever spent before, was there's got to be a product. It's a managed marketplace. They make me feel warm and fuzzy and safe. They authenticate everything, and it feels easy to use at the least. In reality, I was like being introduced to different dealers, and I was told to shop the seller on like competitive marketplaces. And I just felt like super, super lost trying to acquire the watch. And so once I finally got the Hulk, that's what kicked off this entire journey of like imposter syndrome for a bit, of similar to buying a watch. Like, am I qualified to start this business? I had in the past launched products at Google. I knew how to build things, but I was new to the watch space. And I kind of learned very quickly through building the team around Bezel and imparting that credibility and trust in the business. I think kind of my superpower in running this company has been that I don't come from the watch world. Like I empathize with our core customers because I was frankly one of our core customers, and I still am one of our core customers, in the sense that I have watches that I buy from authorized dealers. I've built those relationships out now. But majority of my collection, I buy on Bezel, I buy on the secondary market, and I build it out that way. And so the reason I'll never get rid of this Hulk, even though I get pulled in a different direction in some time. Sorry?
Did you engrave it?
I didn't engrave it. That's actually a great decision I probably should do.
You got to do it, because then you really can't get rid of it.
Yeah. Although you would be surprised how many watches we sell that have like meaningful engravings on them, and they
really
someone else all the time. But
okay, well, fair.
Yeah, I think it's like we use it for all. I took like all the photos for it, and it was the initial model on all of the mocks that we had made, and all of the. I had a bias towards it because it was my favorite watch at the time, and I think it still is one of my favorites. Every marketing campaign we used my watch. I bought this thing to surf in and wear around and beat up. Like I it's a sub, and so now it's just like. It's regarded higher, I think, than a normal sub is because of the allure and the discontinuation and whatever, that I find myself not using it the way I really want to be using it. And so that just feels odd about it to me. Like it lost the tool aspect, and it feels like it sits closer now to like throwing on a Daytona, or throwing on this watch that I'm gonna show people, and people are gonna be like, I like that watch a lot. Like I know what that watch is. Yeah. That almost made me less excited about it, but I still love it. I bought it originally because I thought it didn't take itself seriously. Like it was like, who buys a all green watch as the watch they wear every day? Like it felt like I like that.
Loud.
Guy.
They're quite loud. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think one thing, goes back to your point of like seeing everything in the metal. I also love the term of in the metal. It's very in the watch world, but I don't know. I feel like Rolex does an amazing job at even the watches that you think that are going to be loud when you look at the photos. When you see them in person, there's like a certain subtlety in how some different lights, like it maybe the dial looks black, and some lights it like it doesn't. The sunburst doesn't go as crazy, but in some lights you're like, whoa, that's like a green disco ball. And so I don't know. I think they everything in person just looks way better, and they are really good at subtleties. And so even the loud ones are fun sometimes, but I don't know. This is never leaving my collection as much as I have moments where I'm like, I wish I traded for this. It'd be really easy to justify just swapping them out. But yeah, it's stuck.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because what you're saying, like in the metal, like I remember getting my first sub, which I had gotten because I had bought an Air King. This is 2009, and I got an Air King, and I got the Air King for $1,700, and it was a modern Air King. It was actually
Yeah,
like an Explorer dial Air King. It's like a 369 on the thing, and it was super cool, and I loved it. And at the time, I was engaged, and my wife was like, "This is the dumbest. I can't believe I'm marrying a guy who's like so stupid and like bought a Rolex." And I didn't say this, and now I don't mind saying it, but like I was like, "Well, you think you're the only one getting an engagement piece? Like, yo, pump the brakes here." But
yeah,
like I'd gotten it, but I think the thing that I remember showing it to other people, specifically my dad, is interesting because my dad passed in the spring, and I remember like showing it to him. And when I told him I'd gotten a Rolex, he was like a little annoyed. He was
yeah,
like, "Why would you ever do that?" And I remember my dad being like, Where did I go wrong that my son feels like he needs to buy, a watch?" And I was like, "What the fuck? Like, Dad, whoa, whoa, whoa." And then I
yeah,
remember showing it to him, and I put it on his wrist. And he goes, I remember he looked at it. He wasn't in his wheelchair or anything yet, but he looked at it and he's like moving his wrist around. And he goes, "This is really nice." And he
yeah,
was like, and not that, my dad was like, "You're the best son." And but he was just like, "I think I get it." And I think like that's the thing too, where it's like when you buy, specifically like any sort of like higher end watch, I'm talking like true Swiss luxury watch, there's a feeling when it's on your wrist that there's no website, there's no anything. And this is no shots to anyone. Nothing can convey the emotional, like, whoa experience of just that weight on there, the craftsmanship, how well it's made, all this stuff. And you're like, what the hell? And I remember my dad was like, "Okay, I get it." And occasionally when my dad's like health really went down, I remember talking to my mom and I was like, "I'm gonna buy dad a watch. I'm gonna buy dad a Datejust, and I want dad to have it on." And unfortunately, my mom was like, "Yeah, it's probably not great for a person who's like, in his physical health position to be wearing it in the nursing home that he's at, because those are also things that get
oh
yanked quite a
yeah,
bit." So I
yeah,
was like, "Ah, okay." But having that and owning that, it really changed everything. And it's still to this day, whenever like if someone sees that I'm wearing a watch, I'll always try to take it off and show them so you can feel like, holy cow. That's just a thing that I don't think anyone, like you got to go try things on. You got to go put it, and it pushes you on this journey to where now it's like, okay, like wait till you put a gold watch on your wrist.
yep.
Like then it feels like you're at the gym, just, raising your hand or, on your steering wheel or whatever. I mean, it's just so crazy. And so I always try to encourage everyone to like get an actual, like real watch if you're going to do it. I mean, if you like Seikos, you like Hamiltons, all that stuff, no shame. I'm still collecting Seikos like crazy. But when you get like the big hitter on your wrist, it's just a feeling unlike anything you've ever felt. I don't know.
No, and I really appreciate you sharing that because I stories like that are the reason why I'm super obsessed with watches. And I think that's why everyone gets excited when they get sucked into watches and they meet other people that love watches. It's like there's very few objects I can ever think of that have that degree of a storytelling aspect around
Yeah.
it. And like, what other thing are you putting on someone's wrist? And they're like, I get it. And you're bonding with them through that. And like, it's very rare to find a subset of objects that you can impart that degree of value on and share and build community around and whatever. And it sounds corny and lame to say things like that, but like that's the fun part about watches. And there's the you can dress it up and you can be ridiculous about it. I call it like
Yeah.
the Vegas moments in watches where you're like exactly what you're talking about. You're like, should I liquidate a lot of my collection and buy like a full diamond dial day date? Like, is that me right now? And maybe it is for a second, and like you get to kind of like play that's kind of your part, and you build a story around that and like what it felt like wearing that. And then you move into like this other chapter of your life and you end up with an explorer that, you give to a family member, whatever it is, right? I think
Yeah.
there's something so cool and aspirational about watches that I don't know. I'm really biased because, I've built a whole business around collecting watches and getting people into their dream watch. But yeah, I love cars too. I think there's a very different set of
It's
potential
quite the overlap
buyers.
of watches and cars
There
for
is an
sure.
overlap. It's massive. You should have seen Barrett Jackson. It was amazing. But um, yeah, I don't know. I just think that like the price point of entry is lower. Sorry, for watches. And like,
Yeah.
so I can't to get into like a collectible car space, I can't start with that like, $3,000 Tudor or whatever it is. Like you kind of
Yeah.
have to be, willing to spend 30 grand or whatever to find something interesting.
At
That's not true. Maybe,
least
maybe 15 grand for some cool older stuff. But
you can get a
uh
cool 5 series for
yeah,
like, yeah, 12 to 15. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You're
yeah,
right.
I think you can find your way. But I just think like it's objectively like seen as a crazier decision. I think if you're like, I don't know, I have a couple dollars I started to make, instead of buying the, commuter car I need to get to work, I'm going to buy this like, side thing that is going to
Can
sit in the
only drive at
garage.
certain times of the day.
Exactly, drive
Yeah.
my partner crazy or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
I think
That's fair.
watches are easier to enter than that. Art specifically too, like you need wall space. They're not as durable. There's something cool about watches too, where it's like you live a life with them, I think, differently than other aspects because they're a durable good. Like, that Daytona that you're wearing on your wrist, I'm sure you wear it places and you do things with it and you have
Oh,
experiences
yeah.
with it. And like, you're not depleting the value of the object. You're not like taking this art piece you bought and walking it around downtown Manhattan and showing people and like losing all the value of it, right? Like, and so yeah, it's just this like really special cocktail. And then the fact that it's mechanical and these are like objects that involve all this craft and they're working, to me is just so cool. And you can kind of make them work for the rest of your life and lives after you if you're just that's the cool part. And you talk about the engraving stuff, like, and you can't sell it after you engrave it. Part of me wants like an 80s day date with diamonds on it that has some like crazy quote on the back of it that someone gave to someone. And I'm like, this is like, I'm almost like part of the chapter of this watch now. And it's like ridiculous. And like, who was the person that owned this watch? Now I'm
That's
like,
fair. That's true.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm playing it up the same way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're just so fun.
I mean, I got so for my kids, I engraved their birth dates on it. And I put love dad. Like
The best.
that was basically the I was like, oh, maybe I'll put their name, maybe I'll put this. And I was like, but I'm like, maybe, I don't know. In a lot of ways, if they do want to sell it or something happens at some point, 20 years from now, whatever, I want them to be able to do it. And then at one point I was like, well, should I not engrave it at all? And I was like, no, forget it. Like the point was to give this to them. It's like, yeah, I mean, a lot of these things are like they've been on my wrist through all sorts of different life events I've experienced from traveling, to this country or that country or whatever. And I'm like, okay, like there's wear on this watch. I'm never going to polish it, which I want to ask you about in a second. Um, and so like every scratch that's there is part of the life that it has like endured. But yeah, I mean, I would say it took me like no, maybe even longer than that, maybe like 6 or 9 months to decide like what to engrave.
Yeah.
Like what should I actually put on it? And I eventually was just like, oh yeah, Love Dad is like, it doesn't have my name on it. It does have their birth date, but like it's not that much of a giveaway.
Yeah.
Like I want a level of personalization and anonymity, intertwined on this, you know.
We were joking at the show we were just at, like, I buy the majority of the watches that I own. I've not been gifted a watch or anything like
Same.
that. And so it's a tough life.
Yeah.
And but part of me wants to engrave watches that are almost like a gift from me to my future self.
I think
And
that's fair to mark the
so
occasion. Yeah.
it's not even to mark the occasion, but just like the ridiculousness of it, just because I want to be getting watches engraved. I don't know. And so we were joking about doing the like including the quote that says like let me know how it goes, almost as if like this is me now buying this watch. The justification is I'm getting my gift for
Oh,
myself in the future, and like you look at it later and you're like let me know how it goes or how it went. And it started as like a ridiculous statement, but now I like
I think
even
that's a
with
good idea.
things get real, I wrote it in my notes app on my phone and I was like I should buy a watch at this point and just get this thing. I was looking at we had like an older Calatrava for display, and I was like that would be a perfect let me know how this goes moment.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about picking it up. But yeah, I don't know. I think something about watches makes you want to do that.
What are your thoughts on the cleanliness of a watch? Because I have a few friends, and this is a person like myself too, where it's like it took me a long time to be not that like because of the value of a watch, but because I knew like I wanted to make it look like it came from the factory all of the time. And
Yeah.
so at one point I never did this because a friend intervened and I got like specific types of polishing cloths
Mm,
to then polish my watch after each time I wore it to then put it back in its little thing.
yeah.
And I now am 100% against it, but I'm curious what's your take on whether or not people should like polish their watch or not?
It's a great question, and I think it depends on the watch. It depends on the person and what they want. I don't advocate anyone should polish their own watch. Certainly, I think that was crazy of you to do, but I get the I get the reasoning
This is
behind it.
many moons ago. I'm going to be
Yeah,
very clear. This is when Jeremy had hair, all right? So
that makes
I'll throw
sense.
that out there.
Um, we get different clients that want different things, and I think it depends on the watch as far as like what I would recommend. I think if you're buying a modern Rolex, for example, or modern anything, and you want it to look brand new, and but you want to buy it pre-owned, the term in the industry is retail ready is often something that's thrown around. Like it's
Yeah.
the assumption almost for a lot of these sellers is that a new client is going to pay a premium almost to have it feel brand new.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we see a lot of that. And I would say a good chunk of our clients are not coming in here saying, like, I want an unpolished, in production, current model Rolex, right? They're saying, I want it to look really nice.
Yeah.
And as long as it's not over polished or soft or done by someone, in their home, I
Who?
I think who would do that? I think it ends up being great for the watch and the customer and things like that. I think as you go further back in years from like a vintage perspective or neo vintage perspective,
Yeah.
I think you end up wanting something that is unpolished. And I think the reasoning for that is kind of twofold. One is there's a certain honesty associated with it where you can look at a watch that has wear from the 80s till now and you're like this
Hmm.
feels like the honest representation of this watch. It hasn't been like it doesn't raise as many alarms. The
Yeah.
second is like there's obviously something inherently more rare around a watch that was unpolished but is still pretty beautiful versus every single watch that could have been polished a million times. And I think the third reason is the more number of years and hands this watch changes, the more opportunities there are for someone to come and polish it, which then ends
Right.
up making it over polished. So you have things that happen where it's like the Rolex coronet on the clasp is like border is just a bump at this point, or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the lugs and the edges are not sharp anymore, or whatever it is. And so, um, it really comes down to what the collectors want. Like we have collectors that'll come in and we had a collector just come in and buy a 16710,
Five-digit GMT.
the GMT,
Yeah.
wanted the fuchsia dial Pepsi certain look, didn't
Yep.
care about the bracelet at all, didn't care about the case that much, like was just like, I want the best value out of this and I care about the bezel a lot. And that was the type of collector they were. And then we have collectors that'll come in and say like, I want a Coke I want it to be new old stock, sharp like everything sharp, perfect, fully stickered. And then they'll peel the stickers off and they'll like throw it on their wrist and they'll wear it. I think like we just have
Wow.
different types of collectors that want different things. I think it's very similar too. Like we have buyers that, whether it's preference, cultural, whatever it is, they won't buy pre-owned watches. They want it like unworn, never worn by anyone else. And then we
Yeah.
have collectors that think that's awesome. I think that's why we have the concierge in house and we make sure that we're checking all of this. Our promise to the buyer is just, we know if we know what you want and you buy something, we assume that you buy it intentionally. And our job is to make sure that you're getting what you thought you bought. So if you bought something that's unworn and it's listed as unworn, we're making sure it's true unworn. It's not polished to look unworn or whatever it is, right? And so
Right.
as long as the buyers are getting what they want, I think there's a lot of ability for flexibility. The only thing I advocate is that people wear their watches. It's something, a part dies in me when people buy, an awesome Rolex or whatever it is, and they put it in a safe and they never wear it. I think like these things are made to see the light of day and wear it. And that's kind of my personal collection thesis and why I use Bezel so much as a buyer, but also a seller. Like if I have too many watches where I'm looking at one and it's not getting love anymore, then it doesn't deserve to be in my collection anymore. Like it deserves to move on. And if I miss it so much, I will find it again, is the kind of the way that I think about it. But I don't know. I love to tell the story. The Hulk that I was talking about is like my favorite watch, started this whole journey. We have a photographer, and the photographer came in and was taking like really, really detailed shots of all of the watches in our office or whatever it was. And I had him obviously take like really beautiful, because these look like they come from the brand, like they're insane photos. And I had him take one of mine. And it just took a little bit longer to get the photos back specifically for mine. And I was like, why? What's happening? Like he probably just taking extra care because like we're friends. And he was like, no, like this is the most disgusting Submariner I have ever seen because I use it. Like I take it in the ocean. And he was like, there's like sand in it and it's crusty. And I was like, okay, like don't put me on blast like that. But
Easy, buddy.
yeah, exactly. But I also like, I wore that with a badge of honor where it's like, this is the thing that I bought. It's a dive watch. It's like, I don't know. There's something so much cooler about like, the same way that you buy watches for your kids. I don't have any kids, but I want to be the dad that's like, oh, I always saw him wearing that watch. Like he was doing everything in that watch, and now I have the watch. I think there's something so cool about that. And sorry to my future kids that have beat up gross watches, but I don't know. I'd rather leave a little part of like my life in them before I give them on to someone else,
No, I mean that's beautiful. I mean, my dad, I don't think he thought it was a big deal, but he gave me his old Elgin. I mean, it's not worth anything. And in fact, I'm not going to lie, I probably spent hundreds of dollars trying to make it work again.
Totally.
But he never took any level of care with it. And so it was completely like more or less unusable. But to me, I've worn it and I've basically worn a broken watch because it was my dad's,
Totally.
And I'm like, okay, like there's something there that's just so special. Knowing, I think another thing too, and this may sound like almost like gross to some folks, like, but knowing that it was like on his wrist, like on his, like it touched his skin, and there's no, it's not a spiritual thing. It's just like knowing that like this had this level, um, of like connection and stuff to him. I think especially and now more because he's gone and I don't have I don't really have anything of his that was like, this was dad's, and so it's like, that's a thing that I don't think I now really, really appreciate, and how I want to be a little bit more intentional about my own kids. And, I mean, it's true, like, dust to dust, whatever you want to say, but like, there's some, I don't know, man, there's some special stuff that lingers on these things for me that I'm like, okay, like, did my dad play a show with this? Was he on stage with this? Like what other things could have happened? And like, did that transfer to me? Like, I mean,
Totally.
It's dumb, but like, there's serious things that I think about a lot. And I always try to be as honest as possible on these things too. And it's, I don't think it's, I don't know. I think it's fair to have these discussions more. But I don't know. I mean, that the fact that you like beat the shit out of this watch and you do this, whether you have kids or not, I'm not here to preach at you or whatever, but like it's cool to have that in there versus yeah, like safe things that are just sit in a safe.
Exactly. I just think I think that the most common thing that watch guys do, and it sounds doing very similar, and I commend you for it, is buy watches for their kids to have later, but they keep them now. And
Yeah,
that's a very common thing. And I think from a outside in perspective, people are like, you're just using these moments to buy the things that you want. And you're saying
there's
it's for
some
your
level of
kids.
truth to it. Sure. Yeah.
But I don't know. I think like it's the people that make the objects really special and the person that wore them. And so I think as a kid that wish I got something from my parents that way. I I wish it was something that they wore the same way that you got a watch from your dad, and it didn't matter what the brand was. It didn't matter what the watch was. It wouldn't necessarily be the watch you'd probably pick out if you walked into a watch store today. But
Correct.
it's the fact that he wore it that makes
Yeah.
it the most special object possible. There is something
Yeah.
also really I've never really thought about this, but like you never know what object like they're all objects and you never know like kind of like what's the things that you're wearing like are what's going to be really important to someone later.
Yeah.
And I think watches you kind of know preemptively that it's going to be like it's weird. I don't think there's a lot of other objects that like you can own as a person or specifically as a man that you wear a lot, maybe like a wedding ring or a ring, some
Yeah.
certain pieces of jewelry. I think there's like signet rings, obviously. Your friend should make one with the new crest.
He did.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
I swear to
Perfect.
you, he wears a singing ring and he wears it the same way like the Duke of Windsor and FDR wore it, where it's just like you have your wedding ring on your pinky with the signet ring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
So
Yeah,
anyway, go ahead.
that's similar to like certain watches. Signet rings is one of those things where like I think there's something so cool about it, but I can't be that like it doesn't
You
work
could do
with
with your
me.
initials. Just yeah, I
I
mean, I think that's cool.
I don't know. I have like fucked up broken fingers. It just doesn't work. It doesn't look good. But
Fair.
um yeah, I think there's like a certain aspect about watches that like a little bit more than others. Like there's no other object in my life where I'm like my kid's gonna want
Surfboard?
this. Probably not. I'm gonna fuck that up. Like
Yeah,
the
you might break. I mean, those do break as beautiful as they are, you know?
and honestly the surfboards that I think you pass down that aren't this like sun-baked gross thing that your kid would be like, why do I like ugh, I don't even want
Yeah,
this.
it's
It's
true.
it's like they've already like that era has already happened. It's like longboards that were made in like the latest late 90s, early 2000s. Like I just feel like there's not the same culture of passing down like, you know,
It can't
these
be
really, really
restored too to its original, I mean, you can restore surfboards, but not, yeah, because a lot of them are like
the
fiberglass and stuff.
durability
Or
is just not the same. Yeah. It's like
yeah,
it doesn't have and it's just in its cars, it's like I don't like I'm gonna pass down this like
money
manual
pit.
transmission little money pit, and you're like my kid's gonna be like, why did you do this thing?
The
It's dumb.
mechanic is gone too. Dad, what the
Exactly.
hell?
Yeah, exactly. So um yeah, I don't know. I feel like the tune of this conversation is just talking about how special watches are, but I think that I can't really say that enough, as biased as I am, that like our job is to make sure you're getting exactly what you want and get you connected to the right watch. But it's your job to go out and like make that watch really special and build a life with it and make it something that stays in the family. And if you don't
I
want to,
mean,
whatever, do your own thing. But you
yeah,
certainly
I
can.
do think for me, one of the things I've been like using the app for a lot more now is just the auction stuff. Because I mean, for listeners, and this is like, full disclosure here for me, like yes, I do like the marketplace, but the auctions for me is where it's at now because there are wild deals that happen on there. There are things that I will admit that I've purchased and I'm like, ooh, should I have bought that? I'm like, well, too late now. I love it. It's pretty sick. But there's some great Tudor deals that have popped up, wild good Grand Seiko deals that have popped up on there. Can you explain a tiny bit about some of these other auction things? Like, are they from you? Are they from an individual?
Yeah.
Just so, yeah, just to like refresh.
Yeah. So it's been a big year for auctions for us. I think when we chatted early
Yeah.
last year, we had just launched auctions. I think we chatted in maybe March or whatever, and I think we launched
Yeah.
auctions in early Feb. And so it's become a massive part of our business. And the reason why we built it was just like twofold. On the buyer side, there's benefits, and the seller side, there's benefits. On the buyer side, it's really fun. Like the prospect of every single day, there's new watches. I love using it as a fun discovery mechanism where I'm like, I didn't even know I wanted a Ming, but like this is super cool and it's in my budget and
Yeah.
I'm itching for a watch right now. Like, why don't I bid on this? And then maybe I don't win it, but then the concierge knows that I want a Ming and they can help find me a good deal, or
Yeah.
like all of a sudden I'm researching Mings late at night, whatever it is, right? Um, and so it's fun as a buyer to get deals and have access, discover new things, and just like it drives their retention up. It just makes people really love the app, right? And then on the sell side, the exciting thing is before auctions, the path to liquidity was put the watch on the marketplace, try to find the best price. If you price it really low, it'll sell immediately. If you price it really high, it'll take a little bit longer. Somewhere in
Yeah.
the middle, you find your strike point. The cool thing about auctions is like, you're going to get liquidity in 7 days. Like as a seller, if I need to pay my mortgage next month and I just need a little bit extra cash, I can put the watch at auction and I know that I'm going to sell it within the 7 day window, assuming that the reserve is set correctly or whatever it is. And you're paying fees that are commensurate with the marketplace, which are the lowest or in the very competitive fees. You're not like, you're selling to an end customer. You're not walking into a dealer to get quick cash and losing 40% of the value of the watch.
Yeah.
You're getting most of your money out of it, which I think is like, to go full circle with this conversation, why I'm able to be the type of collector where I'm buying several of these things every year, but I'm also selling several of these things every year. I'm not taking a bath. I'm making money on those transactions, or I'm breaking even because I'm actually selling it to an end customer. So to answer your question, the inventory is not owned by us. The inventory is listed by dealers across the US or kind of private collectors like ourselves. And then our team just curates the auctions and puts them kind of live every single day. So that's kind of the way that the process is structured. And on the buyer side, the fun part is most auction houses have insane buyer's premiums. So, if you bought a watch from a big auction house, oftentimes there's the hammer price and you feel really good about it. And then you get like a 20% buyer's premium bill where you didn't even realize you'd have to pay that insane amount just for the privilege of bidding on the watch and winning at an auction. We thought that was silly. So we don't charge a buyer's premium or anything. It's the same as the marketplace. So if you go on to the Bezel app and you find the Daytona that you want, you can buy it. If that Daytona is also up at auction, now you have the opportunity to bid on it or whatever. And it's been a fun growth moment where, we're doing hundreds of auctions, a week now. We're at the point where, everyone starts to see the watch they actually want at
Yeah.
auction, which is super cool. Like in the beginning, it was opportunistic. Like a lot of our users were explaining it the same way that you were talking about it. It's like, I didn't really want a Grand Seiko, but I found it and it's a great deal. And I know it's a great deal. So I'm just going to buy it. And now we're starting to see folks that are like, oh, wait, like I've wanted a Batgirl for a while. And now
Yeah.
I see a Batgirl that just went live at auction and it's at $3,000 right now, no reserve. Like, whoa, I need to get in the mix here. And so it's just a fun way to start building a collection and scratching that itch of, needing to bid on watches when you're trying to go to bed or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest one I missed that I'm still kind of hoping someone's going to throw out there is, do you remember Tudor did that like concept watch, which was basically, I think it was called like a P1 or something, but it had, um, it was like an early like sub style watch,
Yeah.
and it had like an oversized like clasp, but just around the case. I mean, it's a very ugly watch. It's extremely ugly. Tudor
Yeah.
did it for like maybe a year early on when Tudor was still doing like the rose on the dials on the Black Bay. But I
Got it.
think it was, yeah, I think it was called like a P1 or something. And they're like, and now, we can leave this on there. Like, I think they're probably some of the best value for like weirdness in terms, and also like how many were made. I mean, it wasn't a very
Totally.
popular watch. They made it for a short amount of time. And you can find those at the time. I think it might have gone on Bezel, and I think it might have sold for less than 4 grand, which
Yeah.
is wild because now they're going for more, especially as Tudor continues to grow and people are trying to find like old and weird things that are still from like the newer, more recent launch of like Tudor kind of like coming back to the market. And I'm still waiting for another one of those to pop up on auctions again. But like I mean, I say this in the sense of like it wasn't just like here's a bunch of subs and a random this, or here's a
Totally.
15202, or it's like there is a nice like what felt like a nice curated variety of watches at various price points too. I mean, there's a lot of, there's cool old like IWCs, there's big pilots, there's all sorts of things that have popped up on that have been really nice. And because, at least for me, it's somewhat limited, it keeps me like a little bit focused on the stuff that I'm looking for. But I started saving things, which I never even realized you could do. And like I like to like build like what is my, potential
Wants.
collection yeah, what am I hunting for? You know, and I'll go in and like usually it's like before bed. Seriously, I'm like on my phone and I'm looking through stuff. I'm like, all right, I'm like, ooh, the value of this is kind of going up right now. I'm like, damn it, gold keeps going up. That this I should have bought this watch like, 6 months ago for like 3 grand cheaper,
Yeah.
but it's good. It's good. And I'm still but the auctions on it for me is kind of been like my sweet spot where I just love to sit because you get a good value of the market too when people are panicking about whatever. It's like it's really not the canary in the coal mine that people think it is of like, oh, watch sales are down or whatever. It's like it's
Yeah.
not at all. There's
And it's
still a
super
very
model
healthy
specific.
market.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
we see a lot of stability in a lot of prices and a lot of models, and we see some that are still falling. We see some that are actually like going back up. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag depending on what you're getting. But I'm happy you're adding things to your wants because I think that is a little bit of we had a meeting about this recently. I think that's like the unspoken power feature because we're at a point right now where so many auctions are going live and so much inventory is coming on. Like we just broke $750 million in inventory. Like we have a lot of things.
holy.
And if you have it in your wants, you get notified first
Yeah,
that this new thing just popped on. And we're at this awesome point where like if something is priced poorly, cheaply, whatever you want to describe it, like if it's priced well for a buyer, it goes. Like it goes like within seconds from entering the platform. And so that's why I make sure that all of the watches that I want immediately I have in my wants. We also just launched. It's called Purchase Requests. We launched it,
yeah,
a month or so ago, and it allows buyers to just, enter the price for the watch they want, and it just passively sends that out to our entire syndicate of sellers. So it's been super fun to see that start to catalyze sales in a really cool way. Where it might be an obscure watch that no one has in stock, and so they submit a purchase request for it, and it gets filled immediately by a dealer that didn't even know if it made sense to list this watch because it was so obscure and funky, and so we get a lot of fun sales that way. Or a buyer wants a Sprite, and the cheapest one on Market Anywhere is 18, and the buyer submits that they want to pay 17, and you get some dealer that's like, sure, I just want to get rid of this thing,
yeah,
and they make the sale happen, right? So I think our job this year very much has been kind of like a lot of these really exciting connective tissue features between the marketplace and the auction platform to just, I don't know, I felt as a buyer I just want to know that I can trust everything. And so that was kind of the year prior to this was about like really imparting that trust on our customers, the concierge experience, the in-house authentication, things like that. And this last year has been access, I think. Like, how do we
right.
give you the best pieces? How do we give you the best prices? And how do we keep sustaining that promise to you that we're going to do the best to make sure that if you want to pay this amount, like we're going to go try to get it as close as possible. And if we can't, like we're going to be realistic with you and tell you this is the lowest we can go with it. If you go any lower, I wouldn't trust it, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
And so that's kind of been, the story of the last year, which has been super fun to see it all come together.
yeah. I mean, I agree. It's definitely gotten, instead of a place that I'm like consuming, it's more of a thing that I'm interacting with.
Yeah.
I will say for some folks, because there's still a few people out there who think that they can get like 100 grand for their like 15202. And it's just like that era is going to go down as some like big question mark on it. And I hope not. I don't think there's ever going to be a weird thing like that where, you get something and it's 5, 8, 10x for a modern production watch. And so I will like say that for the record, if someone's like, oh, I have this and I want to put that on there and I'm going to sell I need to get 100 grand for this watch. I paid 30 for it. And it's just like, I don't think that is going to happen unless you found some wild deal on like, I don't know, a 5970 or something like that. Like, sure. But that's the thing that I definitely want to communicate for the record. Like, I think you do get like, what is the true value of this right now on stuff? And I think, yeah, there's still like really, really great deals on there. And I think there are a lot of people who are looking and moving things that for them, they just, especially if you're a dealer, like it's your cash flow for like listeners, like your cash flow is the most important thing you have. So you have to be churning through inventory to continue to acquire more inventory to continue to sell more stuff. And so like there's been really, really good things on there.
Yeah. You mentioned the market with the 15202. It's super interesting. Like
that's an AP Royal Oak for listeners. Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen with pricing, right? Like I think there are things that are objectively rare and we're seeing them shoot back up. Like we just listed an AP Cobra, like an older braided bracelet. Like, and that watch, when everything else was hyped, was in the, it was like a $20,000 watch. Now that watch is shooting up and knocking on the door of, being like an $80,000 watch, right? And so, because it's objectively rare and you had to cut the bracelet and whatever. And so it's cool to me to see like that stuff come into favor. And I think like during that crazy COVID-y, everyone felt rich moment, the objectively rare stuff rose kind of the tide that rose all boats. And then you all of a sudden had in production Royal Oaks that were maybe not objectively rare, but they were hard to get. So they shot up to crazy values. Or you had 5711s trading at 200 grand, or you had the watch on your wrist trading for $55,000, right?
Yeah, like, which is crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, but people bought them at that price. Like people felt justified in buying them and there was still a demand. And I remember in that time, it was, whatever it was, 2021, 2022, like if you got one for 49, you were like, I'm the man. Like I got a deal here. And like, dealers felt like they could sell it for 56 tomorrow, right? Like they felt like they had the leverage. So I don't know if we're going to get back to a place where these watches are trading at those degrees of premiums. However, like we're certainly not at a place where they're trading at retail, right? We were still in the very healthy premium space. And I don't know, like if people start feeling really rich again, like, I don't think that it's crazy to say that it'll move in the opposite direction back up a little bit. I'm just in the past have been naive to say things like that can never happen again, or I have any ability to impart some degree of knowledge on what could happen. But all I've learned in every market I've ever participated in, whether it's collectibles, venture, whatever, the mistakes you say you'll never make again, you end up getting really close to making them again. And anyone that says they have any ability to predict what the markets will do is usually wrong, right? Otherwise, they'd be out buying those watches and stocking them up themselves. So, it'll be interesting to see. We've seen the stability happen. We've seen some watches still be falling knives. It's funny to see how a lot of the brands influence that. Like you have brands raising retail prices on certain brands, and then that raises the secondary market prices, but then it also lessens the demand of the secondary market prices because like, I'm not going to go pick up the watch that I got a call for at retail now because the price discrepancy is not that different between secondary market. So I'm just going to buy it secondary market. Like, it's really interesting to see it come together. Rolex just increased prices meaningfully because of gold prices. It's funny to see how that immediately affects all of the watches in the secondary market. Even the rumor of that coming out drove the yellow gold, white gold watches up. So it'll be a really interesting time to see how it all comes together. Excited for Watches and Wonders to see what comes out. It's always fun to see how the prices start to move.
Yeah, I mean, I will say like the biggest thing I was trying to say for these things is where is if you're getting into watches because you're looking for some sort of alternative asset that you can buy and flip in like 3 months because you read some Bloomberg story ages
Yeah.
ago about how a Daytona was worth. I don't think you're ever going to feel truly happy, and that's the biggest thing I was trying. I remember a guy came up to me. I was at an event and he was like, "Hey," I was like, "What's up?" And he's like, "I got a bone to pick with you." And I was like, "Jesus, okay. Hi, I'm
Good
Jeremy.
start.
What's going on?" Yeah, and he's like, "So I got this Batman. I got it for 22K." He's like, and I was watching the market and it was going up, I don't know, X% every single month. And he's like, "So by my calculations, this watch should be like $50,000. How come?" And I was like, what? I didn't tell you to buy that. I
Yeah.
told you to buy, watch it. If you really love it and you want it, like get it. But like, no, I do not give financial advice. This
Yeah.
podcast is not financial advice. However, like, are you happy? I was like, do you like the watch? He's like, yeah, it's great. I was like, then who cares? I
Yeah.
was like, move on. But it was so crazy. And by the way, whoever you are, if you hear this, I still love you. I still respect you, whatever you want to do.
Totally.
But like, maybe we can try a different introduction next time. But it was, there's that thing that kind of exists there. And so I feel like if you're getting into anything like that, it's just like someone who's like, I bought a holographic Charizard Pokemon card for like $10,000. And why isn't it worth $100,000? It's been, 3 days. It's just like markets don't move like that. But do I think 15, 20 years from now that GMT's he's talking about being worth more? Absolutely. Like it
Yeah.
just, look at the history of Rolex watches over the past 100 years. Yes. But let's pump the brakes. Let's enjoy the wow that's happening now, to quote my kids and Daniel Tiger. Like it's just you can still have a lot of fun and wear it and then beat the hell out of it and you're going to be okay. But yeah, I only say that because I know there's a few folks that like, I don't want anyone to hear this and think like, oh, this is some get rich thing. This is like, it's cool to collect art and watch it appreciate, and you learn more about yourself and what you're doing and what you like throughout the entire journey, you know? So I always try to kind of cover that blanket with all.
The way that we love to advise clients is exactly what you're talking about, in the sense that you should always be buying what you love. And
Yeah.
it makes it's like investing in anything. It's not certain that it's going to go up or down or hold its value. So if you're writing a check into a business, you better like that business. You better feel like you believe in the long term of the business. And the majority of investing is like putting your head down and not looking for the short term. And that's how you win long term, right? I think
Yeah.
with watches, I think about them as a place to park value for sure. Like
Hmm.
I don't think about them undeniably the same way that I think about other nice luxuries in life. Like I think I'm buying this thing knowing that it's going to ideally hold its value, right? But that means buying
Yeah.
intentionally. And I think gone are the times right now where you're buying a modern watch and thinking this thing's going to double in value from the secondary market price that I buy it at.
Correct.
However, if you really, really want a Batman, our job is to say this is the right price to pay for the Batman in today's market.
Correct.
And the questions that we'll answer are like, is this am I going to get hosed? Probably not. Like you're gonna buy this Batman, you're gonna wear it, and you're gonna enjoy it. And the market might creep up a little bit because, congrats, like you're the man. Or the market might creep down a little bit, and then if you lose 2-5%, whatever it is, of the monetary value of the watch, did you enjoy it? Did you get utility out of it? Did you walk into a bar and some other person was like, that's a cool Batman. We should be
Yeah.
friends. Let's do business together. And like you got some other externality out of it.
Tis true.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I think like the likelihood of that happening to me is decidedly higher than if I went and bought a car or if I went and bought a piece of art that doesn't leave my house. Right. So I think like you're already in this alternative asset space, but the driving factor has to be passion around it. I think people get stuck in anything they do if they're doing it for the wrong reason. And if you're doing it simply because you're diversifying, I don't know if that's the right mechanism in today's market. But if you're leveraging the term diversification as a mechanism to justify buying the watch that you want, hell yeah. Like, I think
Yeah.
that is a conversation I'm down to have all day.
For sure.
And I think we just want to make sure that, we're giving you the right information. So you're buying smart in the moment you want to buy versus whether or not you should buy it all. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, great. Quaid, this was sick. This is always a pleasure. Talk to you soon. See ya.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Blamo. Our show is produced by Blamo Media. We're edited by Amar Lowell, and our theme music, as always, by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. If you like what you heard, you know the drill. Share the pod with a friend. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars or thumbs up on whatever other thing you're listening to us on, whether it's Dingledorp or Bing Bong, whatever it's called. But you can also follow us on Instagram for all the hot content. If you want to talk to us and give us your hot take, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at info@blamopod.com. Last but not least, super ultra important. If I had a air horn, I would press it right now. You got to come and join us over on Patreon, because the fun never stops over there. Look, the live show, the free show, whatever you want to call this, we take breaks here and there, but Patreon, it never stops. And we also got exclusive shows like Die Workwear, hosted by Derek Guy and Peter Zotolo, and the Triple J Show, hosted by yours truly with John Moy and Gene DeLeon. There's just a ton of stuff over there. So check it out at patreon.com/Blamo. If not, no worries. We got hundreds and hundreds of free episodes in the feed and more to come. So we will see you all soon.